Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, we have all come across colleagues who confidently disrupt meetings with incorrect proposals because they are adamant about their own expertise. The relative who instantly becomes an expert after viewing a single documentary, the online commenter who debates with real experts. Why does competence seem to be so disconnected from confidence? The solution is found in an intriguing psychological phenomena that was discovered more than 20 years ago. In 1999, social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a groundbreaking study that would permanently alter our knowledge of human cognition. They found a cognitive bias that today they are known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. This phenomenon explains why, as Dunning himself stated, actual specialists tend to underestimate their talents, while the least proficient people in a field frequently drastically inflate theirs. Today, we'll delve deeply into this psychological phenomenon that affects all of us to some degree. We'll examine its origins, mechanisms, real-world examples, and most importantly, how to recognize and overcome it in ourselves, because the greatest part of the club is not knowing you're a member. The paradox of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that those who are most vulnerable to it are usually the ones who are least likely to recognize it in themselves. The discovery of the Dunning-Kruger effect started with an unusual bank robbery in 1995 when MacArthur Wheeler entered two Pittsburgh banks in broad daylight without a disguise, stole from them, and fled when he was arrested later that night. Wheeler was truly shocked to discover that surveillance cameras had captured his image, but he protested to the police by covering his face with lemon juice, thinking that this would make him invisible to security cameras. Wheeler's profound misunderstanding and total faith in his flawed reasoning fascinated psychologist David Dunning, who wondered how someone could be so incompetent that they were unaware of their own incapacity. His groundbreaking work, which was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, examined this phenomenon methodically in collaboration with Justin Kruger, a PhD student at the time. After evaluating participants' logical thinking and comedy language, Dunning and Kruger asked them to rate their performance in relation to others. The outcomes were striking and consistently dishonest. Top performers regularly underestimated their relative performance, whereas individuals in the bottom quartile significantly exaggerated their performance, thinking they had surpassed 62% of their peers when they had only outperformed 12%. Dunning noted that you cannot know you are incompetent, since the abilities required to provide the correct response are precisely those that you must be able to identify. What is the proper answer? This imposes a double burden of ineptitude. People not only lack the skills to perform well, but they also lack the metacognitive ability to perceive their insufficiency. At its foundation, the Dunning-Kruger effect arises from a metacognitive deficiency of failure to appropriately judge one's own knowledge and skills. This metacognitive blind spot provides an illusion of superiority, which can be very impervious to facts. The effect operates through multiple psychological mechanisms. The first is the unknown problem. When we venture into unfamiliar territory, we lack awareness of the full scope of knowledge or skills required. As Dunning explains, the skills you need to produce The right answer are exactly the same. Skills you need to evaluate whether an answer is right. If you lack knowledge in an area, you also lack the ability to perceive expertise, including your own. Second is confirmation bias. When we establish a belief about our talents, we selectively attend to information that supports that idea while dismissing contradicting data. A novice who believes they are skilled will remember their successes, attribute failures to external factors, and interpret ambiguous feedback positively. The third is the difficulty in accurately calibrating self-assessment. Even when trying to be objective, humans struggle to evaluate themselves without reference points. In the absence of clear feedback or comparison, we tend to rate ourselves above average, a phenomenon known as the above-average effect or illusory superiority. Russell accurately stated the fundamental trouble with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so confident of themselves, while wiser people are so full of doubts. This insight encapsulates the heart of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Confidence and skill are often inversely associated at the extremes of the knowledge spectrum. While popular culture frequently portrays the Dunning-Kruger effect as a straightforward inverse link between confidence and confidence, the true relationship is more subtle than a linear relationship. Researchers have established a typical curve that maps the journey from novice to excellent. Begins with what some call Mount Stupid, is the peak of confidence experienced by absolute beginners who have gained just enough knowledge to feel informed, but lack awareness of the vast terrain they haven't yet explored. Those who persist begin the gradual journey up the slope of enlightenment, where competence and confidence slowly rise in unison with persistent practice and study. They finally reach the plateau of sustainability, when high skill is combined with just the right amount of confidence. It's especially intriguing because professionals typically don't feel as confident as they should about their skills. This expert is unsure because they know a lot about how complicated and nuanced their field is. They know exactly what they don't know and how much there is still to learn. Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, once said, "I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong." This intellectual humility is a hallmark of actual expertise, in stark contrast to the overconfidence exhibited by novices. Most of the experimental evidence for the Dunning-Kruger effect comes from labs and academic settings, but it happens in many other areas of life as well. In professional settings, the effect shows up as an unskilled and unaware employee who always overstates their performance and contribution. One survey indicated that 95% of managers thought they were in the top 50% of their peers, a statistical impossibility. This inflated self-assessment typically results in resistance to feedback, constrained professional development, and interpersonal problems within the healthcare sector. The impact may result in fatal outcomes. Medical students with the least experience typically think they are better at clinical work than they are, which can lead to harmful overconfidence while making clinical decisions. One study discovered that physicians exhibiting the highest confidence in their diagnoses did not demonstrate greater accuracy than their colleagues. Rather, they were less inclined to consult references or obtain second opinions. The impact elucidates why some of the most vociferous advocates on intricate policy matters frequently exhibit the least nuanced comprehension compared to others, possessing only fundamental knowledge of economics, climate science, or international politics. People who are not experts in these disciplines may be quite sure of their viewpoints, whereas experts usually admit that there are limits and uncertainties in their fields. In our digital age, the Dunning-Kruger effect has found a particularly fruitful environment. Social media platforms enable individuals with limited expertise to disseminate their thoughts to extensive audiences, projecting an equivalent level of authority as established experts. This democratization of speech, while beneficial in some respects, has engendered what some scholars refer to as an expertise crisis, a diminishing distinction between novice and expert viewpoints, as articulated by Neil deGrasse Tyson. One of the hardest things in life is to know enough about something to think you're correct, but not enough to realize you're wrong. This succinctly encapsulates the fundamental principles underlying the Dunning-Kruger phenomenon. The Dunning-Kruger effect varies between cultures, influencing speech and decision-making in academic contexts and society at large. Research indicates that cultural influences substantially impact individuals' self-assessment of their talents, with considerable effects observed in various societies, particularly within Western, especially American, culture. Self-promotion and self-assurance are greatly esteemed. Kids are taught to believe in themselves and their skills, which makes it easy for them to think they can do more than they can. The American mindset of individual achievement and potential may unwittingly exacerbate the Dunning-Kruger effect by promoting optimistic self-assessment, irrespective of actual performance. In contrast, several East Asian cultures prioritize humility, self-improvement, and recognition of one's limitations. Research indicates that Japanese students generally assess themselves as below average across various dimensions, contrasting with the above-average impact frequently reported in Western populations. This cultural inclination towards self-criticism may indeed attenuate the Dunning-Kruger effect by promoting more conservative self-evaluations. Collective versus individualistic societal orientations influence the manifestation of effects in collectivist societies where group harmony and interdependence are prioritized. Individuals may exhibit greater receptiveness to feedback from others and are less inclined to uphold inflated self-assessments that contradict group consensus. As Confucius astutely observed, true knowledge is recognizing the limits of one's ignorance. Cultures that integrate this philosophy into their educational and social frameworks may inherently foster metacognitive awareness that mitigates the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yet, no culture is exempt from the fundamental cognitive limits that underpin this phenomenon. The essential difficulty of ignorance regarding one's own lack of knowledge crosses cultural boundaries. Although its manifestation differs among countries, the Dunning-Kruger effect underscores the perils of overconfidence. It is crucial to acknowledge that confidence is not intrinsically detrimental. Rather, a certain level of self-belief is vital for motivation, tenacity, and accomplishment. Confidence becomes problematic when it is significantly misaligned with actual ability. This misalignment can result in poor decision-making, resistance to learning, and interpersonal conflicts. Conversely, appropriate confidence grounded in realistic self-assessment can be highly adaptive and facilitate success. Research in performance psychology constantly demonstrates that optimal performance necessitates a moderate level of confidence, sufficient to inspire action and tenacity, however not so excessive as to hinder the acknowledgement of errors or areas needing growth. This calibrated confidence signifies the optimal intersection of self-belief and reality. Notably, research indicates that a slight overestimation of one's abilities may prove advantageous in certain contexts. This minor positive illusion can enhance motivation, facilitate the surmounting of initial obstacles, and foster greater perseverance in the face of adversity. The primary distinction lies between moderate overconfidence that motivates effort and the pronounced overestimation typical of the Dunning-Kruger effect. As psychologist Albert Bandura observed, individuals with a sense of self-efficacy recover from failures and approach challenges by focusing on solutions rather than concerns about potential pitfalls. This healthy confidence fundamentally contrasts with the baseless assurance of individuals ensnared in the Dunning-Kruger effect. The objective, therefore, is not to eradicate confidence, but to nurture it in accordance with actual ability, fostering what psychologists refer to as epistemic humility alongside self-efficacy. This equitable approach recognizes both our strengths and our constraints. The most formidable feature of the Dunning-Kruger effect is the difficulty in detecting it within ourselves. By its inherent nature, the impact obscures our knowledge of our own inadequacy, resulting in a persistent cognitive blind spot that hinders self-awareness. Accepting that everyone is susceptible to this bias is the first step toward breaking free from it. No matter how smart or educated someone is, they can still overestimate their skills in areas where they lack expertise. As intellectual historian Robert Burton writes, the feeling of knowing is not a reliable guide to whether or not you actually know something. To counteract this effect, people should actively seek feedback from others, especially experts in the relevant domain. External assessment provides the objective perspective that self-assessment often lacks, but it requires being open to criticism and willing to temporarily suspend defensive reactions. Focusing on areas of weakness during practice can also help match what you think you can do with what you can actually do. For self-evaluation to be accurate, this practice needs to include clear, quick feedback on performance. Without this feedback loop, practice may actually make people more sure of themselves instead of reducing their confidence. Increasing metacognitive awareness, thinking about how you think, is another powerful antidote. Regularly reflecting on the limits of your knowledge and consciously considering alternative perspectives helps develop the habit of questioning initial certainty. As Socrates wisely observed, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Perhaps the hardest but most effective thing to do is to get used to not knowing and giving quick answers. Modern society often values quick answers and confident claims over careful consideration and admitting limitations. It takes intellectual courage to stand up to this pressure. Being able to say, "I don't know," or "I'm not sure," when it's appropriate is important. As the writer and philosopher Aldous Huxley said, men don't learn very much from the lessons of history. In the same way, the most important lesson of the Dunning-Kruger effect may be learning to question our certainty, especially when we feel the most sure of ourselves. The information ecosystem has changed a lot in the last few decades, adding new dimensions to the Dunning-Kruger effect. The internet has made it easier for anyone to get basic information about almost any topic with just a few quick searches. This easy access to information can give the illusion of understanding, which amplifies the effect. The way social media sites are set up makes the problem even worse because they reward strong claims over nuanced knowledge. Algorithms tend to favor content that gets people to interact with it, which usually means strong, clear-cut comments instead of detailed, qualified analyses. This creates a space where the loudest and most confident voices are heard, regardless of their actual expertise. Filter bubbles and echo chambers make these tendencies worse by blocking people from contradictory information that might challenge their perceived expertise. When people are only around others who share similar views or levels of understanding, they don't have many chances to see their own limitations. The huge amount of information that is available online also plays a role in what scholars call knowledge. Fragmentation is when you get separate facts without the conceptual frameworks. You need to put them together in a useful way. As Tom Nichols writes in The Death of Expertise, this broken up information gives the impression of understanding without any substance. The internet lets us connect with and talk to a lot more people than we would normally meet in real life, but it can also make us think that our views are more popular and correct than they really are. The solution isn't to stop using digital sources of information, but to be more aware of how we think when we use them. For example, realizing that reading an article doesn't make you an expert, knowing the difference between accessing information and understanding how complex systems work, and learning digital literacy, skills that help us tell the difference between reliable and questionable sources. As writer Maria Popova beautifully put it, people who don't have hope are cynical, but people who do have hope are foolish. Taking a balanced approach is important for figuring out how to learn new things in the digital age. The Dunning-Kruger effect only affects one person at a time, but over time it has a huge effect on society's structures and public discourse. Understanding these bigger effects helps us see the effect not just as a psychological curiosity, but also as a major social force in democratic systems. The effect election results when voters who don't know much about policy confidently judge complicated proposals based on a quick understanding of them. This might cause people to back oversimplified answers to complex problems and fall for populist rhetoric that promises black and white answers instead of nuanced analysis in business settings. When candidates with low competence but strong confidence gradually surpass those with higher competence but modest confidence, the effect can cause hiring and promotion decisions to be skewed, a phenomenon known as confidence bias. Organizational cultures that prioritize displays of certainty over actual performance in scientific communication and public health can lead to a backlash against expert guidance. This dynamic was on full display during the COVID-19 pandemic, when self-assured non-experts questioned public health recommendations based on a lack of epidemiology knowledge. It can also have an impact on educational systems, especially when parents or students with strong opinions but lacking in pedagogical knowledge push for methods of instruction that go against evidence-based practices, undermining the efficacy of education. Particularly pertinent is the observation made by philosopher Hannah Arendt: those who are ideal subjects of totalitarian authority are not the fully committed Nazi or communist, but rather those for whom the line between reality and fiction, truth and false, fades away with less spectacular results. Democrat societies are not immune to the erosion of epistemic authority caused by the Dunning-Kruger effect. To address these societal implications, we need to work on our own metacognitive development as well as reform our institutions to make a clearer distinction between confidence and competence, to reward intellectual humility in addition to demonstrated ability, and to establish more effective systems for evaluating and communicating specialized knowledge. As we delve into the Dunning-Kruger effect, we uncover a basic paradox about human knowledge. As our knowledge grows, so does our awareness of how little we know. This paradox leads us on a counterintuitive path, from the naivete of beginners to the calculated uncertainty of experts. As we navigate an ever more complicated world full of authoritative voices offering simplified certainties, it is important to remember that the road to true knowledge starts with acknowledging our limitations and embracing the discomfort of uncertainty. The Dunning-Kruger effect provides a powerful lens for self-reflection and intellectual growth by explaining why true mastery is often characterized not by absolute certainty but by comfort with complexity, nuance, and the limits of current understanding. Being cognizant of this cognitive BIA is becoming more and more important because it allows us to differentiate between unearned competence and hollow confidence in ourselves and others. Realizing that overconfidence is often rooted in the structure of knowledge acquisition rather than arrogance allows us to approach disagreements with more patience and intellectual charity, as physicist Richard Feynman put it, and this understanding of the Dunning-Kruger effect can help us have a more compassionate view of human error. In my opinion, it is foolish for a scientist to try to solve problems that do not pertain to science. This modesty from a great scientific mind in history reminds us of what the Dunning-Kruger effect teaches, that wisdom comes from knowing how much more there is to learn rather than being sure of anything. By embracing the paradox that our knowledge reveals our ignorance and our understanding reveals complexity, we can learn more, have more fruitful conversations, and achieve a more accurate balance between our confidence and our competence. By doing this, we can begin to overcome the bias that we have been studying